Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us for the latest episode of Missions Talk. My name is Mike Falkenstine, and I'm here again with my co-host, Steve Schirmer. And Steve, today we have a wonderful episode, one that kind of comes from, we got the idea for the episode based on something that happened to you recently as were overseas, but it is actually a common situation. And I'm really excited to talk today about kind of, maybe the title would be something along the lines of, we as Westerners need to stop doing kind of, our business as usual overseas. And so I know that it kind of started with a tweet that you had. And so I'm going to read it, and then we can kind of begin talking about this episode. So the tweet was, have met with two pastors in Turkey, each in a different city. Both unequivocally have said that Western agencies need to stop doing business as usual if they seriously want to serve their country. And so, yeah. This is an important issue to talk about, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I didn't expect, for you to reach out to me about that tweet to say, "Hey, let's do a missions talk about this."
Oh, right. Well, I think it happened, of course, because it kind of touched a nerve that I've had for a long time, and a heart that I've had, that we really do hear these stories, right, from really around the world. As I know you travel to different places that I go to, and so between the two of us, there's just a lot of local pastors in places around the world that are just sort of like these Westerners. They come in and they just think they kind of know it all, and they, telling us how to do ministry in our own city, and none of it makes sense to me. I think you've had kind of that same experience around the world, haven't you?
Yeah, and welcome, we can welcome the train, if y'all can hear that, to our show.
That's right, your local train in South Carolina.
Yeah, it'll pass. Oh, anyways. Yeah, so, I was, first, before we get into this, we do, because we had talked about this before we even started recording, that we recognize that not every Westerner does this. Not every Westerner who goes out, or even foreign missionary, whether it's from the West or from the East, that when they go out to a foreign country, that they act like this. We know people who serve very much in line with kind of what we're challenging people to consider. But we also have to recognize that it is an issue, that what we're discussing is an issue. It's common. It's common enough that almost everywhere I go, I hear the same complaint and critique from national pastors. I've heard it. I know, Mike, you have heard it. And not just in this one country, but in numerous countries, I've heard this. I've seen it. So, it's really why we wanted to discuss this, because when I was meeting, I had the privilege of going to Turkey, which is a beautiful country. It's definitely one of my favorites to visit. Got to meet with these two pastors, these two leaders in their own respect. They speak different languages. They come from different cultural backgrounds, even though they both live in the same country. They do know each other. I asked, and they do know each other. They don't work together because of the distance between them, but they are familiar with each other and familiar with each other's ministry. These are not foreigners. Again, these are nationals. And so, it was just enlightening. Even though I've heard all these things before, it's always a good reminder to hear them. Otherwise we can get trapped in what we're doing and how we do things. And if we're not willing to listen to the local people on the ground, not the foreign missionaries who serve on the ground, but the local people.
That's right.
Because, the argument is always oftentimes I've even found that we treat them as if they don't understand the situation in their home country. The reality is they fully understand the situation in their home country. They may approach things differently. They may approach security differently. But do not be deceived for a moment and assume that they are ignorant of the reality in their country when it comes to politics, when it comes to persecution, if that exists in their country. And we're not talking just about Turkey, we're talking many places. They understand the church planting dynamics. They understand, many of them understand the many methodologies that are out there for church planting and disciple making, which we will talk about. At least I'll bring up as examples of some of the frustrations that I have heard over the years.
That's right.
So good. I'm excited about this conversation.
Yeah, me too. And I hope that, it'll just be another piece in the puzzle for us with Western agencies, just to kind of wrap our minds around that we really need to come into these places as learners and, listeners first. And it just seems to make sense that those who've lived in a certain place over the course of their entire lives, right, would know better how to do that. So I've got three questions for you, Steve. Of course, again, the questions are around your statement that they've said that Western agencies need to stop doing business as usual if they seriously want to serve their country. So the first question is, what was the context that caused them to say that?
Oh boy, trying to wrap up hours worth of conversations into 30 minutes. It's a good question, and unfortunately, I think answers to all three questions are very similar in some ways.
Okay.
And so, but within context of these two specific conversations I had, and for now, I'm going to highlight, I guess both of them said some things that I was very thankful and grateful for their bluntness. These two men did not hold anything back, and it became a running joke with one of them. So let me just share some things that they talked about that frustrated them, and that would kind of give you some context of why we even had these conversations. And we didn't go into these conversations wanting to talk about this. This is just asking about their ministries and what's going on, and what is best in terms of people coming in, outsiders coming in, partnering locally with local, all those questions. In the context of those questions, all these things came out.
Okay.
And one of them is an Arabic speaker. That's his native language. And as we were talking, he started talking about this Canadian guy who comes from, he's Canadian, so he comes from Canada. Right. Anyways, he comes to Turkey to build a partnership with this pastor, who is an Arabic speaker, and proceeds to tell this pastor that God has called him there to train him how to share the gospel to Arabic speakers. So let me say that again in case you missed it.
It almost seems comical, doesn't it?
It became one of those inside jokes that everyone has. So the whole time I was with them, I just kept saying, "Pastor, I'm coming back to teach you how to share the gospel with Arabic speakers." Anytime something happened, that's what I would say, and he would say the same thing back to me. Yeah, you're going to come back and teach me how to share the gospel with Arabic speakers. So a Westerner going in, telling an Arabic speaker they're going to teach the Arabic speaker how to share the gospel to fellow Arabic speakers. I don't know if it was the same Westerner but I think it was someone else came in with the agenda to teach this same pastor how to share the gospel in 3 minutes or less, because he said you must be able to share the gospel in 3 minutes or less. Well, this pastor recognizes that, maybe in the West that works, but he's like, that doesn't work here. He says, when I sit down and share the gospel, I'm with them for a couple of hours. He says, we're talking over tea, food, coffee, whatever.
Right.
I'm not coming in 3 minutes, I'm out the door. He says that to him, from a cultural perspective, didn't make any sense.
All right.
Another Westerner came in, and I know I'm talking about Westerners here, but let me tell you, there are Easterners who do similar things. whether
Okay.
it has to do with prayer or other ministry facets that we're involved in. But one guy came in and says, you're doing church all wrong. If you're not doing church planting movements like they did in the first
Acts church, right?
century,
Right.
you're doing it wrong. And you need to create a vision that's going to reach tens and tens or hundreds of thousands of Arabic and Turkish speakers around your country. These are kind of the context. It's not, the issue isn't a foreigner coming into their country, because they both recognize we need help. When
Mm-hmm.
you're looking at a country of 85 million people, and the stats, they're different. It depends on who you talk to. Some people it's 5,000 Christians, some people it's 10,000 Christians, some people it's 15,000 Christians in the country. But in one of the countries one of the cities I was in, if you can imagine the whole state of South Carolina, their population, and the only Christians in South Carolina is my home church. That's
right.
it.
It's that many. It's that many.
Yeah. So, one person said 500. Then I heard another pastor said 1,000. But regardless, 500 or 1,000, it didn't hardly put a dent in the percentage at all, considering the size of the city. So they recognize we need foreign workers are welcome. They want help. They do have suggestions on what foreigners need to do in terms of to get started, which are wise things like learn the language. As simple as, which is sad that even has to say, learn the language, for goodness sake.
That's right.
And they have opinions on which type of foreigners work best, which group of which language groups, whether it be Turkish in Turkey or Arabic speakers in Turkey, and which ones don't work, and some really wise advice coming from them. But the issue is they keep running into people who come in and saying, no, God has called me to do this. And while they're not saying these words verbatim, their actions are saying, get out of my way. I'm going to do it anyways. But the point of all that, not to harp on Turkey or make that the center of our discussion, is just the frustration of outsiders coming in and not asking, hey, local pastor, help us discern what's going on. Help us discern where we might fit. What is best? What about church planting? What about evangelism? What's the best way to share the gospel? Is it a 2 to 3 minute testimony like we tend to push in the U.S.? Or is it a 2 hour, 3, 4, even 6 hour period of time where we're sipping on tea or coffee or food or sitting in the living room on the floor? What is the best way?
Right.
And going in with an open heart. There was a pastor in Kyrgyzstan who said he was so tired of Westerners coming in, outsiders, not just Westerners, but outsiders coming in with their 5-year plans in one hand and a closed plan in the other, which they refused to adapt to the Kyrgyz lifestyle.
Okay. So that gets to the second. You're already kind of talking about the second question.
I told you they kind of bleed with each other.
Yeah, they do. But the second question was, what did the pastors mean by business as usual? And it sounds like the business as usual is these Westerners and people coming into their place, and kind of the pastors, feeling ignored by those coming in. Which, to me, it doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, it seems like what makes sense is these people have lived there probably their whole lives, that we would want to, kind of take the lead from them. I mean, we should want them to lead. And, I think part of it, Steve, is that for those of us in the West and North America, maybe in particular, we think we kind of know everything there is to know, and certainly our resources are high, right? We have, literally some of the best seminaries in the world, and our Christian nonprofits are quite developed and, vast, and have created a lot of resources. And so it does take sort of a level of humility, right? Quite a bit of humility to go into a place like Turkey, or, I was mentioning, I hear this a lot in China, during the years that I was super active there, that Chinese pastors would say a lot of the same things. And so coming in with kind of that open heart to hear what local pastors say, have to say about all of this does take some humility, doesn't it?
It takes a lot of humility. And I like what you said, just the feeling ignored part, that a lot of these local pastors, ministry leaders, they're not all pastoring a church, but just ministry leaders. I mean, I know a guy in India who leads a network, engaging with people across his area of India. And, this isn't a critique of methodologies. This episode has nothing to do with methodologies. It's more of our attitude in walking in. But we were having a discussion. We were in Malta at a conference, and I was sitting down with them, and I said, have you ever considered the disciple making movement, church planting movement methodologies? Whether it be T for T, Discovery Bible Studies, Four Fields, whatever. Have you considered any of that? He says, "Oh, absolutely, we've considered it." He says, "But I will never do it." I was like, "Huh, really?" I was like, "Well, why are you opposed to it?" I was wondering, was it theological? Some people I know, it has to do more of a theological issue for them versus a methodology. It had nothing to do with theology to this guy. It had to do with the attitudes of the outsiders coming in.
Wow.
He says, I've gone to these people who promote church planting movements. We go to these conferences. He's been to the similar conferences that I've been to. And they talk about these grand numbers. They talk about numbers in emails and on websites, and they promote all this stuff. So he said, I went to them and said, can you introduce me to these leaders in my home country so I can learn from them? The outsiders were the gatekeepers. Oh. And in every case that he asked, they said no. For security reasons, we can't. I'm sitting there thinking, who are these outsiders they are to sit there and tell an Indian they can't connect with an Indian?
Yeah, you want to have a talk with those guys, huh?
That would be like an Indian coming to an American, leading the ministry, telling my pastor he's not allowed to talk to a pastor in your city because of security reasons.
Right. That doesn't make any sense at all. Yeah.
This gatekeeper mentality has, while I think Americans are the worst at it, I don't think we like to acknowledge it. I think overall we like to make excuses for it. Mm-hmm. But there is a lot of gatekeeping mentality among Westerners, Americans in particular, but also Eastern foreign missionaries who go to other countries, where we become territorial, where we want to protect, and then we refuse. It's just complete nonsense, in my opinion. And until we're, I think, ready to actually have real discussions about how we're doing these things, it's not going to change. I mean, I keep hearing it year after year, but I don't see a whole lot of change out there personally. And when I keep hearing pastors frustrated with this approach, it tells me that not much is changing, because it means we want to lead. We're coming in dictating what needs to happen. Yes, I agree. There is unreached people groups, unengaged people groups. There are communities where there's no churches, no Christians, no missionary, nothing. I agree that those places exist, and we need to do everything we can to get there. But out of respect, every country, even North Korean, has Christians. Mm-hmm. But out of respect for these Christians, these countries, for the pastors, for the churches, we don't need to act like they're ignorant or invisible.
That's right. Amen.
And we need to come alongside them and figure out how we're going to approach it together. Let's get into the conversation, but with an attitude of learning first before telling.
Right. Well, you're getting then, Steve, as we get close to the end of this episode, kind of the third question I had, which is, what would be a better way then for Western agencies to serve their country? Whatever country you're going to, to serve in. Because we always want to leave people with a few kind of, here's some solutions, so to speak. So, what in all of that, then, what are your ideas about what would be a better way to serve these local leaders?
I think the beginning point is what you had already indicated, is humility. I think we walk in with a spirit and an attitude of humility, open ears and shut mouths.
Kind of learn from them, right?
Learn from them, hear them. I mean, sitting down with these pastors and they don't, asking questions is not what, ask questions. They want you to ask questions. I think they enjoy that you're passionate about their country, that you're passionate about reaching people. They love that. They want to know that you are committed to their country and cities. But they need to have the primary voice, especially at the beginning, no question. Because doing that and going into Turkey and asking these questions, whether it's there or India or Kyrgyzstan, and finding out, what do these men and women think? What are their experiences as nationals, but also in their interactions with outsiders? That whether we're a church going in, whether we're a missionary with an organization going in with that attitude. Like I said, we recognize not everyone does this, but it is a significant enough of a problem that we wanted to highlight this. But I know that my church spent 5 years getting to know a pastor and their network in South Asia before really committing to diving in with them. But even after 20 years walking alongside them, those nationals, they're the ones that make the decisions in the end of how things are done, where things are done, and who gets to do them. Okay? They get to decide the methodologies that are applied. The outsiders don't get to make those decisions.
Oh, right.
And my church has an incredible long relationship with them that is fruitful, that is beneficial to both, where both sides get to fulfill their calling in that area of the world. And they've seen thousands and thousands of people come to Christ, and hundreds of churches planted, and hundreds of church planters trained. I mean, it is happening. This group of nationals, they needed help. They needed people to come alongside them. But they needed people who were going to, they didn't need people who were coming in bark orders. Or
That's right.
Dictate the direction.
That's right. Yeah, Steve, as you're talking, I'm thinking one of the obstacles for Western organizations, agencies, churches, I think, is that we do really want to have sort of immediate results, right? And, part of it for people like you and I, we have, donors that are helping us with, partnering with us. And so we want to be able to have something to say to them, right? right away. And it's way better, I think, to take because what you're talking about with your church is that this was kind of a long play, right? Kind of a long-term view. It's like, hey, we may not see anyone come to Christ in the first 3 years, but we have a much longer view. And
absolutely,
that's hard for us as Westerners, isn't it?
Yeah, my pastor likes to talk about relational capital. Okay. You have to build capital within the relationship. Some people will say you do that to share the gospel. But in this case, I'm talking about the relational capital you have between brothers and sisters. So while these nationals in India are the ones that lead the charge, and we follow their direction as a church in this ministry, our pastor has built enough relational capital with them that he can speak into things, and they welcome it because they know he respects them. And he values their leadership. He values their opinion. And so they'll come to him and say, hey, what do you think about this shift in our ministry or this addition? They will go to him in a heartbeat. But we have to prove ourselves as outsiders. The nationals don't need to prove themselves to us. Okay, we're walking into their territory.
That's right.
Just imagine someone from another country coming into our backyard telling us what to do. It would not work here in the States. I think we would if they were a wee bit of little thing, we'd just flip away and get lost.
Right. That's right.
And in reality, I think how we would respond to them if they did what we do to them, we just assume that, I think many of us assume that when we walk in, they just have to listen. And
that's right.
Whether we recognize it or not, our attitude, our actions, I think, speak that. And we have to we have to bend over backwards to really work against that, because it's in our nature, especially as Americans, we want to help. We want to fix problems. And there's nothing wrong with that mindset. It's who we are. But in recognizing that, I think we should also recognize we need to go over the top in terms of humility, in terms of listening and taking our time. Using the excuse that, well, people are going to hell tomorrow. Okay, I get that. But if you don't know the language, if you don't know the culture, if you don't know how things work, they're still going to hell tomorrow just because you show up. I mean, you're not going to be able to do much until you learn first.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
My Chinese teacher always said, and I think this applies across the board, you can learn Mandarin perfectly. You can learn to speak it through Western eyes, or you can learn to speak it through Chinese eyes. You have not learned Mandarin until you've learned to speak it through Chinese eyes.
That's right.
Okay? You can learn the technicalities of any language. You can share the gospel in those languages, but until you learn to speak as the culture of the place you're serving, you're still not doing it right. And you still have all of us have a lot to learn.
That's right.
In those areas.
Yeah, Steve, I appreciate what you said in what you wrote in our show notes, that we need to remember that these people who are serving in local areas, who are the local people, they'll always want to reach their own people more than we want to reach them, right? I mean,
that's absolutely true.
This is their people, right? And if they've come to Christ, they definitely want to learn. They definitely want to reach them more. And if we can go in, I think, with a open eyes and open heart, and with this humility, as Westerners, there are things that we can do to serve them, to walk alongside them, to minister together with them. I mean, it is true. The Western Church does have a lot to contribute, but learning where that is and how to do that and the appropriate ways to do that, I think, is the kind of a final thought for me is, we do have, I mean, you think about our kind of advanced methods of theology and teaching and training, and there are a lot of things that we can contribute, but I think knowing how to do that in a local area is important first, right? So, Steve, as we close this episode, any final encouragement or thoughts from you for those that are watching and listening today?
Yeah, I'll reiterate what you said. We need to think about the long game when we're thinking cross-culturally. Not coming in like a bull in a china closet, but thinking about what's it going to take. That's what I love, the posture of my pastor and the elders in our church, of how they've approached global missions, is they recognize, as you said earlier, you had said something to the effect of, you know, we want to go in and get something done within a short amount of time, like 3 years. When
Right.
in reality, we need to be looking at it as something. We may not see a convert. We may not see a church planted in 3 years. It may take 10 years.
Right.
Some of these are very challenging places.
Which is hard for us. And
Yeah, but we need to be looking at the long game.
we do.
Stop worrying about, what our supporters. We can report. Be honest with them. Be truthful.
Right.
Share stories. But if you're consumed with what supporters think, that you're having to appease them to keep the funds flowing, then you're looking at this in all the wrong ways. You're not focused on the kingdom part. You're focused on the money part.
That's
and
right.
I know
Which,
any of us can fall into that trap. I have,
Yeah.
No question.
I was going to say that could be a whole separate episode.
Yeah, I think we've all fallen into that trap.
Yeah, it's a common trap for sure.
But
and again, it's a common trap because, at least in part, donors are expecting results, right? They give you money, so they want to see, okay, what did that money go towards, and how many converts and how many churches, and so then the pressure's on us to produce that, and that's where you get into that really nasty kind of deal of trying to sort of produce results for them when, again, probably the better way is to take a long-term view. So anyway, well, yeah, Steve, big episode, a lot to talk about. We could
go on and on.
Yeah, we really could. And so we will probably hit more of this topic as we go on, right? But I'm so glad, Steve, that not only you sent that tweet, because then it caused us to go, yeah, we could probably talk about that because it is such an important issue. So thank you for that. Appreciate all your experience and sharing, what you're learning. And I hope this has been a help to those that are watching. We really do want to be a benefit to your ministry and to help you be more effective as you impact the world for Christ. We're just so thankful that you're joining us. And of course, we'd love to hear from you. You've got show ideas, of course, facebook.com/missions talk. You can reach us there. We'd love to hear from you. And we're thankful that you've been with us today. And we'll look forward to having you with us on the next episode of Missions Talk.